Hey, welcome back to Notes from My Journal with Faye Faye. So this is officially episode 1 of season 3. Yes, I said it. The first intro was an intro. So let's just say a bonus of the bonuses. So today we're talking about Owambes. And we're not just talking about Owambes, we are talking about traveling, being the Owambes. What's that? What's Owambes? Traveling being the Owambe for abroad people. Yes, I said it. So, for those who don't know, Owambe is going to weddings, weekends. It's such a tradition back home. I don't even know where the word Owambe came from, but from the word Owambe is Yoruba, is a Yoruba word, meaning that it's happening here, where it's happening. So Owambe is mostly weddings, but now it has transitioned into so many events where you wear a traditional dress. It's called anko. Anko is a dress or a material that is shared to everybody. You pay for the material, of course, and then you take it to your fashion designer or your tailor, and then they sew in something beautiful for you for the event. Okay, so let's go back to Lagos. I was born and raised in Lagos, and I'm representing today, as you can see, made in Lagos. So growing up in Lagos, almost every other weekend, there's always one wedding or the other. And there's the meat, the jollof. You go to Owambe parties for the jollof rice. I know by now you know what jollof is like. You know the jollof war. It's not a war. It's like a banter. Yeah, you know how delicious it tastes, both Nigerian or Ghanaian or Senegalese jollof. Today's not about jollof wars, so let's just be nice to each other. So we lived for the jollof of Owambe parties or wedding parties over the years. I've come to realize that it has transitioned into intercontinental, seafood, all the stir fries. But me, I'm not about that life. If I want to eat that, I know how to go to a Chinese restaurant or an Asian restaurant for that. If I'm going to an Owambe party, you serve me the fried rice, you serve me jollof rice, you serve me the meat, the peppered meat. Well, years years after, growing up, it started transitioning before I left. So there was the samosas, the puff puff, and it's called the small chops. So yeah, that transitioned, and I really enjoyed that as well. Now back to where we are at now. um we come to realize that when you live abroad, there's really no one best to attend. And for someone who doesn't do like celebrate birthdays and stuff like that, it might be a different ball game. What we end up, getting to enjoy is the social gatherings of Christian environments, where you go out on lunches, dinners. They are fun, but it gets to a point, culture, your roots will call you. You start missing, what's the things that made you grounded back home. You didn't even know they made you grounded. It was just like normal vibes. But when you are detached from that societal, you know, integration, you then start to what's the word here? Appreciate it for what it is. And then you start discovering traveling. Even though people back home travel as well. So like, growing up, we had like neighbors who used to go, classmates who used to go to the UK, to London, to the US. So traveling has always been, something that someone has been around. And traveling to see your grandparents, it's everybody travels. But this type of traveling is different because now it gives you a sense of connection and discovery. You now start to learn different cultures, you start to try different food, you start to find how you connect in the places that you were not connected to in the past, like growing up. You can start to realize that everybody and everywhere is the same. It's just some little different things. So you see the enjoyment, the beauty of attending an Owambe back home. You start enjoying or trying new food. You start trying new food. Now that the Owambe has transitioned into, intercontinentals, also traditional meals, people would want to try new meals, in a wedding party, if that's what is being, that's what is being offered. So imagine you're like in Lisbon, for example, and they're telling you like, oh, and you're asking your restaurant, what's the best meal that I would enjoy here. Although my friend would Google that before going, but me, I would not. It's not my pattern. I'd rather go and ask. I like them to give me the historical blah 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 yada yada. She would read everything, and so she's like, "Can you give me this?" Because she knows what she's asking for. Me, I'm like, "What do you have?" So I can get the story of why I should take it, if that makes any sense. So then you try something new, and you're like, "Oh, this is not bad after all." Thinking of it now, right? I remember the meal I had in was it Porto or Lisboa? I think the last meal in Porto. I'm not gonna forget that food. So much more that when it was 1 year after I had that meal, I had an internal anniversary. I could perceive the smell. I was walking down the street of where I am right now, and I could perceive someone cooking that meal, and I'm like, this reminds me of something. And then I'm like, oh, it was odd boiled potatoes and roasted steak that I remember. And guess what? When I tried to remember when I had it, it was September of the previous year, and it was September of that year when I remember. Like, oh, okay, some mini, memory lane kind of stuff. So you tend to start seeing, or you start seeing yourself, the what's the word I'm really trying to look for, the things you enjoy from home, you start infusing it into things you now discover. If that makes any sense. So you can now relate, you can now eat a meat pie that looks like something back home, maybe because the store that sold it is a Caribbean store, and they have meat because they call it casa. It might not be Mexican, please don't quote me, but the meat pie had this word Casablanca on top of it, or Casa something something, but it was from South America. And then it looked so much like home. Sometimes you'll be disappointed. Don't let's be real here. You'll be disappointed sometimes. You're like, oh, I thought this was gonna be like the Nigerian meat pie, because that's the feeling you're trying to get, right? But then it gives you something else, and you still appreciate it for what it is, or you don't, and then you keep it moving. And then maybe you're gonna see a Scotch bonnet, and you're gonna like it. Either way, it's a win-win. You keep discovering, and you keep learning. So my friend and I were just having a conversation, I think last month in December, and we're having conversations about how people of our age group brackets, are married with kids, and they are always are going at weekends for parties of somebody's wedding or the other person's name ceremony or something like that. And then she then said that there are certain people who would say, you like to travel a lot. You like to travel. Why do you always travel? And then it just came to my mind. I'm like, wait, traveling is an Owambe for someone who chooses traveling to be their Owambe. It doesn't have to be what you do. The fact that you don't do it does not mean it's a bad option for someone else. You don't see my friend telling them, our other friends, that, oh, you guys go to too many weddings. Not did she say you guys go to too many naming ceremonies. Nor did she say you guys are always in events every weekend. Why then do you have a problem with someone who chooses to travel every other time? It's priorities, baby. She chose traveling, you choose events. So be it. We know people who travel as a couple, like we have couple vloggers who travel for a living. We have family travelers who travel with their kids. Heck, we even have people who live on the road. Like they don't, like in the US, they travel from one state to another. That's how they live. They call themselves student of the world. So why would then you make someone else feel I'm trying to, don't let me look for words right now, feel some kind of way for choosing what makes them comfortable, while it's not your own forte, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that's how the topic came about. Traveling is abroad people's Owambe. I remember a guy who came from the US to Portugal, and it's made him feel really grounded. I read his caption, and I understood where he was coming from, you know. That was the closest he could feel like he was back, like he was in Africa, but it was in Europe. Like you felt the sense of being in Africa, but in the Europe version for him. And obviously, he said over the years he has always come to Portugal with his family. So many people's experience. I remember being in Switzerland. That was the first longest trip I've ever um been on in my entire life. I went by train, Interrail. My brother introduced it to me, and I was scared at first because it was my first long trip. Before that, I always went to Germany and Austria because it was just 5 away from where I am. But then, um, it was the first major trip I had to go to Switzerland. 10 hours on the road, on the train, by rail. 10, I think 14 hours back. I'm never gonna do that again. But it was a good experience, and I think that was the day that was what birthed my traveling, you know, discovering discovering that traveling is actually for me. And then 2019 came. I think that was the most year I ever traveled in my entire life. So I was in US in April and in Indianapolis. I did New York, Indianapolis, New York in the span of 3 weeks in April, and then I did Tallinn in June, June or July for my brother's graduation, and then I did New York. No, sorry, and then I did London, Prague to visit the person I was dating at the time, to then cross over to the new year of 2020, and then back. That's the wildest year of traveling, because when I was going to the US, I did transited in London and then New York and then Indiana. It was just wild. I didn't even know what. It's just looking back at it now, I'm like, what, girl, you really did that? It was a lot. I wouldn't do that anymore. Like, lockdown really took a version of me that that don't that wouldn't make me want to travel without intentions. Like, those were traveling with intentions to, connect with family and friends, but this time it has to be with a purpose related to me. There has to be a reason, like, related to whatever I'm choosing to do. Not I don't want to be traveling for luxury for now anymore. The time for that to come again, but for now, I've had the best share. Does not mean if there's one this thing that I can afford, I will not go. Me, I will go. I really would love to go to Coachella. Is it no, not Coachella, no, Afro Nation in Portugal, but that stuff is crazy expensive. Like, why would I do that to myself? To go to I think Lisbon for 3 days. It's yeah, it's for my bracket, it's too much for me, because obviously I would not want to go alone, so my friends will be paying that same amount. It's just too much. Maybe one day we'll be able to afford it, but for now, peace out. Yeah, so the storyline here is that, do you, as long as it's not hurting anybody. If you are the person who loves to do if you're a sport person, be a sport person. If you're a traveling person, be a traveling person. If you're a social media person, be a social media person. If you're a party person, be a party person. If you're a family person, be a family person. And if you're a combination of everything, be it. Just do you. Like my friend who loves traveling, that we had a conversation about, saying that where the idea of traveling is an Owambe came from. She's not a social media person. You can't catch her there, and that's a fact. You can't know where she is today if she's on a trip. You can't see it on her socials. It's not there. So we should just live and let live. I do understand that some people don't live and let live. They like to be in other people's businesses, but it is what it is. If you wanna be and just be, live and let live. Just do you. The world we adjust. And that's on it on the first episode of season what's that? First episode on season 3 of Notes from My Journal with Faye Faye. Until the next one. I was supposed to do this for the ending, but I can still do it, so